Hello and welcome to this video on alkali or basic soils. These are soils with a pH above 7, soil that has chalk, clay, peat and other similar material. The easiest way to identify alkali soil is a soil test kit, which may be a combination of liquids and indicators or a pH test strip. Although not as common as acidic soil, alkali soil can be used to help or support the growth of certain bonsai. If you use tap water and not rainwater for your bonsai, this may be an inevitable development. Much tap water contains alkali metals like calcium. If you're concerned about your water containing it, you can test it over time by seeing if scale develops on any of your things that you clean with water regularly. This will show up as a slight haze of white substance that can be easily wiped off. Species that benefit from an alkali soil include lilacs, hydrangeas, yew, ornamental cherries, and a few others. The hydrangea is perhaps the most interesting because it goes from a strong blue color in acidic soil to a strong pink color in alkali soil. For the most part, you do not want to push your soil pH too high in an effort to get a satisfactory level of alkalinity. The ideal range is between 7.1 and 8. The first way, and perhaps the most common way to make your soil more alkali, is to add lime. This can be lime sulfur, calcium carbonate, and historically oyster shells. Liming is common because these supplies are readily available. You can add the solution or solids dissolved in a carrier like water. This will then be diluted down to an appropriate level. You then water your trees with this solution, which will drive the pH up towards an alkali measure. These options are helpful if you want to change something over a long time frame. They tend to act over months if not years, and as such, because they are long acting, you don't need to reapply them regularly. Dolomite is another option. It's a naturally occurring rock that is a mixture of calcium carbonate and magnesium carbonate. It's another long-acting option, although not quite as long-acting as your liming solutions are. This is why it's often used in gardens to break down heavy clay soil. If you were to think of it in terms of how much time it will act for, it's somewhere in the middle. It takes less time than liming, but it's not as quick as other options. The next option is going to be wood ash, and this is used to increase soil pH. It's often described as a natural option, or a good option if you want to avoid the use of inorganic chemicals, for what that term is worth anyway. The downside to this is that if you use wood ash too frequently, it can keep pushing the pH up, so far up that it actually starts to harm the plant. You need to be especially careful with this if you're using it in a soil mix that is very free draining or has a lot of sand in it. The final option is something we've already mentioned, but it's worth reiterating. That is water that is already rich in minerals, sometimes also considered heavy water. Water from town supplies can have trace amounts of calcium, ammonia-based compounds, magnesium, and others. This can gradually alkalize the soil. If you look at your bonsai pots and you see that there is a white skim or film forming on the pots, this is what you're seeing, those minerals being deposited. There are a few ways to mitigate this. One of the simplest and easiest is to simply leave your water out with an open lid for a day or two. Much of the material that we're worried about will either sink to the bottom or evaporate off. If you don't have that option, using fresh rainwater is best, but even that can sometimes carry certain issues depending on how you've gathered that water. Overshooting your targeted soil pH is not good. Some species will survive in a pH of up to 9, and that's considered extremely high anyway. As adding organic material will make your soil more alkali in this case, it's much harder to correct than over-acidifying your soil. You can try and add manure or similar material if you're trying to make your soil more alkali without using any of the chemicals we mentioned, but the only way to really mitigate the effect of alkalizing your soil is to add an acid. You can also in some cases try things like pine needles. These are slightly acidic and will help to drive down the pH slightly. The other option is something like vinegar, and this can also be useful if you're trying to keep snails and slugs away, as the vinegar will kill them as well, so you can get away with killing two birds with one stone. In general, most species do not benefit from an alkali soil. The simple reality is most places where you would find this naturally occurring are not where you would find large trees, shrubs, and similar that are turned into bonsai. There are rare exceptions that do benefit from this, and these are often served reasonably well by a neutral or much less extreme alkali soil, something more tempered and reasonable. If you're looking to try and create an alkali soil, there are ways to do it that don't require pushing it to an extreme, and simply maintaining a small amount of some sort of alkalizing agent in a fertilizer cage or similar will generally achieve the desired result. Even if that's not the case, you can often find additives that are much easier to predict the outcome of. If you are trying to create a soil mix overall that's more convenient and has a standardized pH, the options we've mentioned are an easy way to do that, and some of them are, as mentioned, long-acting. Thank you for watching this video. If you have found it interesting, consider liking, sharing, and subscribing. Please post any comments, questions, or suggestions that you have below,